Welcome to CorelDRAW for Laser Engraving session number 2. We're going to cover several topics in today's session, and certainly if you have any questions, please let us know. Okay, so we're going to start with talking about alignment and distribution and how to use that feature to align different objects on our plate. Let's take this logo first. So let's say that I want to center this logo on the center of my page. If I go to the Object menu and I come down to Align and Distribute and I click on Center to Page, it's going to put this in the center of our page. Okay. Now notice that there's a hotkey for that feature. If we go up here to Object, Align and Distribute, if I hit the letter P, it will actually center it. So if I hit the letter P on my keyboard, this object's now centered to the page. We also have a dialog box here, or I'm sorry, a docker that gives us those same features. So let's say that, for example, I have options of aligning active objects or aligning to page or to center. So I'm going to use the to page, and I'm going to select the horizontal alignment, and it aligns it to the center horizontally. And then if I want to put it to the center of the page, I can click this button and align to vertical. So let's go ahead and undo those. And let's say that I want to center this text directly underneath my logo. All right. So if I hold down my, first of all, let's go ahead and we'll click on this object, hold down our Shift key and click on the second object. The second object is always, or the last object we select is always going to be your anchor. Okay. Again, the last object is always going to be, that you select is always going to be the anchor. So if we come over here and we do active objects, and then I go ahead and I click on Align Center, you'll see that it actually brings the text perfectly centered underneath my logo. But what if I didn't do that? What if I had clicked on my logo first, hold down my Shift key, and then click on my text? Then I do Align Center. It moves the logo over the text. So you've got to decide what is it that you want to be the anchor in your selection. What is it that you don't want to move? Okay? And again, that'll be the last object that you select. So let's go ahead and move this off the page. And let's do a really simple layout here. Let's say I have a hole that I'm going to have drilled, and let's say that that hole is going to be in a specific location. All right, let's say it's going to be at 1.25 inches in the X direction, and in the Y direction, let's say it's going to be at 5 inches. Now I have this text. I don't want to have to type in those settings. I want to basically have this text to align to the center of that hole. Again, if I click on the text first, and then I hold down my Shift key, and I click on the hole, and I come over here and I do Align Middle, right? It's now aligned with that hole, okay? If I had the text that needed to be centered up above, then I hold down my Shift key, again click on the circle last, and then we can go ahead and do Align Center. Pretty simple. All right, so let's move this off, and let's use this example. Okay, again, same kind of situation. So let's go ahead and we click on our text, hold down our Shift key, click on this bar, and I want to align that to the top. I click on the bottom one, hold down my Shift key, click on the bottom, and I want to align that to the bottom. And I could align this to the middle, or I could actually use my distribution. I could select these three items, and I could come over to my option of selection, active objects, and I could say that I want even spacing between those. Okay, so now those are evenly spaced, and of course this middle line of text is aligned with the middle of the bar just simply because the top and the bottom are already aligned. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a really simplistic kind of like a gauge, if you will. All right. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move this bar up. I'm just using my cursor key to nudge this up until those touch. And then I'm going to select all of those together, and I'm going to say I want to align those to the top so they're all even. Now I'm going to select just the right-hand bar, hold down my Shift key, click on the bottom bar, and I'm going to say Align Right. I'm going to do similar thing with the middle one. I'm going to go ahead and do this align center. And then we'll go ahead and select the left one, and we'll go ahead and align that left. Okay, so now I have some text that I want to align on those. So first things first, let's get these on the same plane. So we want to have the same baseline, if you will. So I'm going to move this down about where I want it in a relationship to those bars. And then I'm going to select these two, hold down my shift key, and I'm going to select the 0, and I'm going to say align bottom. And then we'll select the 100, and we'll highlight this bar here, and let's go ahead and say align center on that. Do the same thing with the 50. Align center, and do the same thing with the 0. Again, I'm always selecting the item that I don't want to move last. That is my anchor. All right, so just a couple explanations, a couple little examples there for using align and distribute. Let's do a more complicated example. So I'm going to create a perpetual plaque. What a perpetual plaque is, like employee of the month, if you will. And we're going to create a real simple one here. Starting out with the actual individual plate size. So this is a simple 3" by 1" tag. First thing I need is an outline around this. So I'm going to hold down my shift key, and I'm going to double left click on the rectangle tool. And that gives me a box, the same size as my plate. I'm going to change that color by right clicking to black, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give it a little bit of a wider line width. I'm going to go with 1 point. So let's assume for a second that we're going to drill holes into a wooden plaque for these plates. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to draw a circle. So let's hold down my control key, and we're going to draw a circle. Let's go ahead and set that circle size to 1/8 of an inch. All right, and let's fill it with black. Let's right click on the slash to turn off the outline. And I want to align that to the center of this plate. Well, if I go to my alignment and distribute Docker, if I go to my align and distribute Docker, I'm going to click on plate, and I'm going to say I want to center that vertically, and then that's centered. Now, as far as its position left to right, I have to really type that in. I'm going to set 1/8 of an inch here, 0.125. Okay, so now the center of my hole is basically 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and it's centered on my 1" plate. I want another one of those over on the right-hand side. In this case, it's easiest to just duplicate. So I'm going to set my Y amount to 0. I'm going to set my X amount to 2.75. And then I'm going to go to Edit menu, and I'm going to click on Duplicate. So let's put some text in here, just for visual representation, and maybe we'll use it as a template for doing a print merge. Okay, and let's change our size of our text down to 20. And let's hit the letter P to center. Remember, that's the hotkey. Okay, so we have our first plate. Now that before we actually go and change to a larger plate size for the full plaque, I'm going to select all these items, and I'm going to group them together. So let's go to Object, and let's click on Group. Deselect the plate and come over and set our plate size. Our plate size is going to be 9 inches wide by 12 inches tall. Let's go to our Zoom tool, and let's zoom to the full page. Okay, we'll have this first. There's many ways to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and use the Align and Distribute menu. So I'm going to duplicate this manually. I'm going to drag to the right while holding down my left mouse button, and I'm going to right click. I'm going to drag to the right again, and I'm going to right click. All right, let's move the plates a little bit closer together. Now I will select all 3 of these plates. I'm going to use my distribute option for active objects, and I want to even space those by using this distribute space horizontally. Then I'm going to align all those to the top. Then I'm going to group them. And let's go ahead and change our reference to page, and let's center to page. And oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I need to actually make my plate size 10 inches wide. It's a 12 by 10 plaque. Once we have our first row, we're now going to duplicate this down. So we need to set our duplication distance. Let's set our duplication distance in the X direction to 0. Let's set our duplication distance in the Y direction to a negative 1.5. Go ahead and we'll select our row. And let's go to Edit menu and duplicate. I'm going to use the hotkey for the next two. We have all this created, and at this point we can group these together. And so if I go up here to Object and come down to Group, and let's group those together. At this point I can hit the letter P to center to the page, or I can move it down on the plaque until it's in the location where I want it. Of course, we can ungroup all of these and we can change the text as needed. But what we've done is we've actually created a perpetual plaque where you could actually, with your laser, you could engrave this border, you can engrave these dots, and you might make these dots a little bit smaller for the screws to go in and hold the individual plates. The individual plates might be cut out of some sort of a plastic, like a brushed gold or brushed silver plastic, or if you had metal plates that you sheared, you could engrave those. We're going to cover guidelines next and show you how guidelines can be used for alignment. When we have these guidelines, first of all, to get a guideline, you have to left click on your ruler and drag down onto your plate, and you can see you get this guideline. Now, these guidelines will not engrave at your laser, and they won't print to a printer either. They're simply there for reference. We're going to use it for alignment, we're going to use it for visual reference. So let's grab another vertical guideline from my vertical ruler and come over here. Now the position of these guidelines can be controlled up here in our property bar. So I have a 6-inch wide by 8-inch tall plaque, and I'm going to set this guideline to be 5 7/8. Yes, you can type in fractions and it'll do the decimal equivalent, and it's going to put it over here on the right hand side. And then we're going to do the same thing on the left hand side. We're going to type in 0.125. And then let's do the same thing with the top here. This is going to be 7 7/8. And we're going to click on this last horizontal line and let's put that down to 0.125. So in this particular example, what I'm doing is I'm using guidelines to show me where the borders of the plate are going to be. In essence, I don't want to engrave with my laser to the left of these or to the right of these borders or to the top or the bottom. This could be representing a pre-printed border. If you have a plaque that you ordered from a manufacturer that already has a printed border on there, you want to make sure that your text doesn't engrave off the edges onto those borders. This is a great tool for that. It's also going to be a great tool for alignment, which we're going to use next. Let me grab another line coming down here, and we're going to get rid of these in a little bit too, and bring another line over here. So I want to snap to these guidelines for alignment. I must go up to my icon bar, click on Snap To, and I have to have guidelines checked for this to work. If you grab a line of text and you move it near a guideline, you'll see that it'll highlight in blue. See, it highlights in blue? That shows that the top of that text is aligned with the very top of that guideline. Same thing with the baseline. See how that's aligned and that's in blue? And if I come to the intersection of two guidelines, you can get the same situation where it grabs and aligns there. Works the same with objects. So if I have this object right here and then I come over to the double guideline, you can see that it's snapping to those guidelines. So if you have those guidelines in a specific location, you can make sure that your objects are exactly where you want them to be. And it's more of a visual rather than just using nothing but positional numbers, XY coordinates. What if we want to get rid of guidelines? If you click on the guideline and you just hit the delete key on your keyboard, it's gone. Okay? You can also right click and left click on delete and get rid of it that way as well. All right, so using this particular border right here, so this is a corner border. So first of all, I need to create 3 more, correct? So holding down my control key, I'm going to grab one of the handles, I'm going to flip over to the right, and I'm going to right click. And that just created a second corner, okay? And obviously it's the same size, it's symmetrical, it just happens to be mirrored. Now I'm going to grab those 2 together, I'm going to hold down my control key, and I'm going to grab a handle and I'm going to flip down and right click. Again, I'm holding my left mouse button down while I'm doing this so that I make sure that I'm able to create a duplicate. Let's grab this corner and let's move it down. Notice that I'm getting that blue line highlight when I get close to my guidelines. Let's do the same on the bottom right corner. There we go. And then upper right, and then upper left. Okay, and there we have it. So pretty quickly we were able to create a border on this plaque. Let's grab this next example, and I'm going to go ahead and group it temporarily. And let's go ahead and center it to the page. Remember, I've got the page edge right here. I can center it in this direction, and I can center it also horizontally. And let's ungroup this now. Let's go ahead and ungroup. I'm going to use a guideline for something else. Let's drag a guideline down, and I'm going to use it just for visual representation. So if I zoom in on this, first of all, let's select the bottom text. So let me go ahead and let's click on this text. Okay, and we're going to cover fitting text to path a little bit on another session. But let's just say I'm trying to make sure that this text is perfectly centered on the bottom of the circle. You don't really have justification around the circles. What you need to do is figure out as it looks centered visually. And the best way to do that is if you put a horizontal line that bisects the bottom of that circle, I can use that as a frame of reference to see if my text is centered on the bottom of the circle. So if I go ahead and I start to adjust my offset here, I can now look to see, is the O the same distance from that horizontal line as the A? And it looks pretty close to me. So now that's centered on that medallion. So if I go ahead and I zoom back out, and let's go ahead and zoom to page, you can see that this is now centered. So again, guideline can be used for snap to. Guidelines can be used for just a visual reference. Also can tell you where borders are. So there's a lot of, and there's many other uses for it as well. But I'd say that those are the ones I typically use, and maybe you'll find some applications for it as well. Our next topic is going to be on artistic text versus paragraph text. So artistic text is the type of text you're going to use for the majority of your layouts. Now, to get into artistic text, you basically click on the A over in the toolkit, and then come out over on your plate and just left click and release. If you left click and release and you start typing, this is now artistic text. Okay? If you click and drag, so if we click and drag a box, this is now paragraph text. I'm going to explain the differences between these two types of text, and you're going to see in our layout some of the features for both of them. Artistic text has the advantage of we can do all kinds of things to manipulate this text. We can, of course, we can rotate it. I can rotate this, say, 20 degrees. Okay, I can skew this text. So if I click on this, I can actually skew this. I can actually add a perspective. So if I stretch this down, I can actually change the look of that artistic text. As I'm going to demonstrate here in a minute, we can use our shape tool to make changes in the position of the text as well. The nice thing about all this artistic text and all these manipulations, I can even change my font at this point to whatever font that I want to use. And it's going to keep that perspective, it's going to keep that skewing, it's going to keep all of the changes that I've made. let's do a subscript. So again, a feature and one of the manipulations that I can do with artistic text. To do a subscript, the first thing I want to do is change the size of the actual subscript, the actual number that's going to be centered on the baseline. Next, I'll click on my pick tool, go to my shape tool, and in my shape tool, I'm going to click on the actual handle for that number just to the left of it, use my cursor key to actually arrow down, nudge it if you will, so that it's centered on the baseline. So a real simple way to do subscript. You might think, well, why would you go through and break these items apart? And if you break them apart, you won't be able to keep the kerning between the text. So if we come over here and I can change to a different font, notice that it keeps the kerning, it keeps the position. It doesn't matter if I come through and I change to whatever font that I want to use, it's going to keep the relationship between all three of these characters the same. Another manipulation. So let's say that you have someone who has a name like McHugh, McCleskey, or something of that nature, and they want to put this C traditionally as aligned with the top of the character. Again, we'll just go to our shape tool and we'll click on the handle to the left of that C, and I'm just going to nudge it up until it's centered with the top of that character. We go through and we can change again. I could change to Times New Roman or any other font, and it's going to keep the kerning between those characters. The relationship of the baselines are all going to stay the same. Let's work on an example of paragraph text. So I have some paragraph text here, and the nice thing about paragraph text, if you're trying to manipulate a lot of text, you can make it look like newsprint. You can control how wide it is. You see, as I basically control this envelope around the text, it controls the text itself. When the outline turns red, it means that there's more text that's not visible. So if I stretch down my envelope, you can now see all the text. Okay, so again, you can make it as wide or you can make it as narrow as you want. All right, if I have an object, just like you would have in a newspaper, I have an object that I want this text to wrap around. Let's do a circle. Let's do a square, or a rectangle, if you will, that might represent some sort of a graphic in a newsprint. What I want to do is on these objects, I want to right-click on them, and I want to say Wrap Paragraph Text. Again, it's on the object, not the text. And again, right-click, come down and left-click on Wrap Paragraph Text. Now, if I grab this object and I move it over, that's not exactly what I'm looking for. I really want that text to really follow the curvature of that circle. If I come over in my Dockers and I left-click on Properties, and then I have different items up here at the top, I want to click on the last one over here, I can control how that text reacts with that circle. I don't want it to react as a square. I want to react as a contour. That's a little bit better, but as I decrease this value, it's actually going to bring the text closer to my circle. All right, let's go ahead and bring this over, and you can see, let's do the same thing, and that's as a square. I want to actually do contour, and I want to bring the text in closer. If you have paragraph text, you can create in a visual effect like this. You can create something for a photograph that the text wraps around it if you're trying to recreate some sort of a newsprint article. Paragraph text is great for doing any kind of a long description or a representation of text that's going to be, in this case, it's a poem. It could be, any type of long text that you're trying to engrave. Our next topic that we're going to cover stylistic sets, extended character sets, how character map works, and a few other features. I'm going to recreate this last name. So if you look at this last name, Pena, obviously we have the P and the E on our keyboard and the A, but we don't have the Enya. Well, at least on our keyboard, it's formatted for English, but that doesn't mean that you can't type in these extended characters. Any of the European characters you can get by just knowing what the number is associated with that particular character. So if you go down to your search bar and you type in CHARMAP, for short for character map, you're going to get this screen to pop up. Okay, so what this screen tells me is all of the characters that are available in Arial font, and you can select different fonts as well. I want to know what the keystroke is for this character right here. So I'm going to left click on it, and you can see that down here at the bottom it says keystroke Alt plus 0241. Every single letter on your keyboard is associated with a number. A capital A is a 65, a capital B is a 66. It just so happens that the Enya is beyond the number of keys and represented that we have on our normal keyboard. So there's a number associated with it, 0241. So we're in the middle of typing this last name. What I do to use that 241 number referenced is I hold down the Alt key on my keyboard, and I must use the numbers on the number pad. I type in 0241, and the Enya pops up. And then I have my lowercase a. Okay, if I come through and let's swipe through this, I'm going to go back to character map, and let's look at some of the other symbols that are available. As I scroll down, you can see there's all types of symbols that are available in this one Arial font. If I decide that I want to bring some of those symbols over, let's keep going here. Okay, so let's say I want to bring in some Greek letters. I'm going to go ahead and there's another way to do this. I'm going to select this. I'm going to select theta, kappa, sigma. All right, so let's say we have all of these characters that are highlighted. I can just highlight these and copy them to the clipboard. So I have my sequence of characters that I want. Simply copy them to the clipboard. Let's come back over to CorelDRAW, highlight the area that I want to replace, and let's go ahead and hit paste. And I want to discard fonts and formatting from the character map. There we go. So again, those symbols are located in the Arial font. Because of the fact that Arial font is Unicode, they can actually store up to 10,000 characters. If you have a customer that comes to you and they have a particular font or particular translation for a language, and they have the font that went with that, you can simply load that font into your Windows, and you can use whatever language translation you want within CorelDRAW. It's very flexible that way. What if we have a monogram font? I'm going to do two examples here. This first one's going to be an interlocking monogram. So I'm going to choose from my font list. Okay, Vine Monogram is a very popular font. You can see here that I have lowercase, uppercase, lowercase. So even if I change that last character, you can see that it's still going to work. It's still going to be, still going to work together. It's still going to be interlocked. It's still going to look good. The problem comes whenever you do a circle monogram. So if I want to change to a circle monogram, let's go to my list here and go to a circle monogram. You notice that my right character is not there. Well, the reason for that is my lowercase character is always the left side of the monogram. My uppercase is always the middle. I can't use that same lowercase character on the right side because it's not going to complete the circle. I happen to know what the right side character is. I'm going to go ahead and type that out. So we're going to type in lowercase a, uppercase A, and the number 1. So you can see that that completes the circle. Well, you might be asking yourself, well, how the heck do I know what that right side character is? Character map can help you with that. So if I go to character map and I change to my circle monogram font, you can see you have different keystrokes here. See, that tells me it's $sign. Let's get rid of the Greek letters. Okay, as you work through and you click through these different options, it tells you what the different keystrokes are. There's an even easier way to do this with a macro that we have available that you can use to actually load in your different keystroke combinations. Before we leave this topic, I want to talk about stylistic sets. This text over here. This is using a font called Gabriola. Gabriola has different stylistic sets. Most TrueType fonts have some sort of a stylistic set. What a stylistic set is, with all those 10,000 character spaces that you have with the font that uses Unicode, you're able to put in different kinds of characters and styles if you want. You don't have to necessarily use all of them for extended character sets and for other languages. So looking at Gabriola, if I swipe through this line of text, you'll see that you have this little triangle right here. Okay, so if I left click on that, it gives me a preview of all the different stylistic sets that are available with that particular font. I want to use stylistic font number 7, and you can see it adds that style to it. If I change the text on there, it's going to automatically change with it. So if I come in, I type in, you can see that it changes all of the styles with that particular font set, with set 7. Okay. That again is the Gabriola font. Just because Gabriola has it doesn't mean that other fonts don't, as I mentioned before. I'm going to change this font style to small caps. So if you look over, and this is Times New Roman font. If you look at small caps, it's a very popular setting for a lot of fonts. People want the lowercase characters to be uppercase. So if I click on the font styles, you can see that this is uppercase, lowercase, or small caps, and then this one has a fancier stylistic set. The final topic I want to go over here is plaque layout and design. We're going to take some of the things we've learned here with text, and we're going to make a nice looking plaque. Whenever you're laying out a plaque, there are certain guidelines that you need to adhere to make the plaque look good. You have to make sure that make the lines that are bolder and larger based on the importance of that particular line of text. You need to use at least 2 different fonts in the layout, but try not to use more than 2 fonts. You don't want it to look too busy. Use extra space to separate the different sections. And finally, you use ornamental designs to further separate the sections. I have my text entered in here, and it's, of course, artistic text. I'm going to change my justification to center. I'm going to go ahead and separate out my spacing. I'm going to use my shape tool. I'm going to grab this handle and drag down to get a little bit of separation. Now let's start working through our guidelines. Jane Smith is the most important line here, followed by 25 years, followed by Rockwell Automation, then our quotation, which are these 3 lines here. Next, I'd say the date that it's given, and finally the least important line is going to be presented to. I'm going to double click, I'm going to swipe through that line of text, I'm going to make it bold. I'm going to change it to Times New Roman, and I'm going to make it much larger. Let's make it 65. 25 years is the next most important line. We're going to highlight that. Change it also to Times New Roman. We're going to change our size. Not going to be 65, let's try 55. And we'll make it bold as well. I don't think I made James Smith bold. Let's make James Smith bold as well. Rockwell Automation is the next line that I want to adjust. So let's go ahead and change Rockwell Automation. I'm going to leave that as Arial. I'm going to change this to 50. That's a little large. Again, this is just, what looks good on the plate. Let's make it 40. We get to our quotation part, and I'm going to italicize that. I'm going to leave that, I'm not going to make it bold. I'm going to leave it just regular. And let's change the size up to, say, 35. Then we have the date, which I'm going to leave at the roughly 30 size, but I'm going to change it to Times New Roman in italics. Finally, presented to, let's decrease the size of that. Let's make that 20. So if I go ahead and I hit the letter P to center this to the page, we've got a pretty good start on it. We've made the lines more important through least important based, showing basically making them bolder or making them larger in size, or both. Now what we want to do is we want to change the spacing. You can see that the larger lines of text already have more spacing, but I really want to start to move things closer together. I'm going to use my shape tool for this. We'll click on our shape tool, we'll select our text, and first thing I want to do is I want to move 25 years up closer to James Smith. I'm going to drag with my left mouse button and highlight the handles for those characters, and then I'm going to use my nudge tool to nudge it up so it's a little bit closer to James Smith. Let's do the same with presented to. I want to bring presented to down closer to James Smith, the name. Now let's go ahead and bring Rockwell Automation down closer to the date. Finally, we really want this quote to be centered inside this area. I'm going to drag a box to highlight the handles of those 3 lines. And then just visually, let's try to get it where it's centered between 25 years and Rockwell Automation. Finally, I'm going to hit the letter P to center this on the page. Once we have everything set up here, this is the time that we can start to modify this as far as does it look good on the page. If I hold my Shift key down, I can grab one of my handles of all the group and I can actually scale it down or scale it up until it looks the way you want it to look. So it's going to scale it proportionally. We have an ornamental here. So I'm going to grab my ornamental and I want this to be centered on the page. If I go over to my Align and Distribute Docker, I can click on Page and I can say Center to Page. So we're centering it to the page horizontally. Now I want to duplicate this, but I don't want to shift it left or right. So let's change my X amount to 0 and change my Y duplication amount to -1.5. Select my ornamental here, go up to Edit menu and click on Duplicate. Now I can nudge this down until it's where I want it to be in my layout. And there you have it, a finished plaque design. You can use these same parameters for any kind of a layout. If you're creating a name badge, it's a good idea to use a different font for the name and a different font for the title so that it comes through. You may use an ornamental to separate those two. When you start to look at what's pleasing to the eye, now that you have these basics, you can expand beyond this. Just use this as a basic formula to get you in the ballpark of where you need to be, and then you can come through, make whatever changes you want, and be creative. That's the end of our session number 2. Thank you for attending, and please look forward to coming to our session number 3.